Hopefully you guys can see. I've got 7 people already logged in, so I'm hoping you can see. If you can see and hear me, just type something into the chat window, which should be to one side of your screen. Once I'm sure people can hear me, then I'm gonna crack on. There's a couple seconds delay, so by the time you hear this, I'm hoping that a few of you would have logged in already. What I'm gonna do while that delay takes place, and you're just gonna say hi to me. I see one person's already done so. I just want to say thank you to everybody for joining. This is the second webinar I'm doing. The first one was on goal setting, which general feedback suggests it was very successful. This one is on interview skills. Generally, I do three different workshops as a basic. I do a presentation skills workshop. I do the goal setting skills, which I converted to a webinar, and I do this one for interview skills. Interview skills for me is something which is very much related to and looks very, very similar to, good old-fashioned presentation skills. As I go through today, I'll be explaining to you why I consider presentation skills and interview skills to be one and the same thing. I certainly consider interviews just to be a very formal and tight presentation. For those of you who may be having some trouble, you can actually go to my Google Plus page where this has been beamed live. So you can also see this on my Google Plus page if you're a Gmail subscriber. I'm not going to lock it down like I did with other ones. So just want to make sure most people can hear me. If people can just say yes, they can see and hear, then I can crack on. If you can't hear me, then it's your fault. You just need to look at the volume settings either on your speakers or your headphones. I'm going to give it until 5 past, and then I'm going to crack on. It is Sunday, it is a bank holiday. I'm sure everybody has lots of stuff they'd like to do. So while I'm waiting for the 2 minutes to pass, or the 1 minute now, let me give you some quick background into who I am. As you should know by now, my name is Paul Lawrence. I am by trade a telecommunications project manager, and I've worked in telecommunications since 1984, if you can believe I'm that old. While here in the UK, I've taken to not so much work for organizations, but to work as a consultant, and therefore I change roles every 3 to 6 months. Just getting different roles, completing projects, and moving on. And as a consequence of that, I have had to really fine tune my interview skills to a level where, knock on wood, so far I'm generally never out of work for anything more than a month after I start looking. It's not easy to do because sometimes the reasons why people fail at interviews are tied up into a whole range of things. But what we're going to try and do today is just give you some of my experience, some of the stuff that I have done, and just try to really get rid of a lot of the bits and pieces around it and really debunk all the things that might be making someone feel uncomfortable. Someone might be making you feel that you're challenged in an interview, and we're just going to work our way through that. All right, as far as I'm concerned, we're going to start. I did say 6 o'clock, and it is now 5 past 6, so let us crack on. Okay, so let's work with the fact that you have now received that letter, that email that says we would like you to come for an interview. I want you to first of all to start to think about what that means. It means that of potentially hundreds of people, you have been selected. And that should give you some amount of confidence already. One of the things that people say to me when they go for interviews, they're nervous, they're jittery, they don't know what to say. Well, listen, the first things first, you would not have gotten that letter if you were not considerably better than a lot of people. They eliminate a whole mass of people for a whole range of reasons. But nowadays, employers simply do not have the time. They just don't have the time to interview people who they don't think can do the job. So I want you to understand very clearly that the moment you've been selected for an interview, it's because as far as they're concerned, you can do the job. So what's the purpose of the interview? The interview's purpose is to find out if they want to do the job with you. Very rarely nowadays is it still about the technical skills. And those that do have technical skills and competency skills, they will have tests. They will do tests that you will need to do to prove your competence skills, and that's fine. But actually, the core part of it is that what they're trying to ascertain is whether you're the right fit for them. It's really down to that. So you should be giving yourself a pat on the back already that your CV, whatever representation you gave, because interviews don't have to just be about jobs, but whatever it is that you put forward has ensured that they are happy for you to come and sit down in front of them and figure out exactly, are you the person for this job? An interview is really just a presentation. And some people I know who are on this webinar have been onto my presentation skills workshop before. And in my presentation skills workshop, one of the things I try to tell people is that when you're doing a presentation, it is always best to talk about something you absolutely know, not something you're blagging. And if you think about it in the context of a job interview, for example, there is no excuse. You should absolutely know everything about you. You're the candidate. You're the person they want to dig into. You shouldn't be umming and ahhing. You shouldn't be overly nervous because really, you're just talking about yourself. And I know that for some people, talking about themselves can be very difficult. But this is one of those times when you really have to tuck it in, get a bit of ego, and get it done. So, what did they see? They saw your CV. Now, I'm going to just give you a little bit of retroactive advice and warn you, make sure that whatever is on your CV, you can back it up. Now, take note, I didn't say don't lie on your CV. Because guess what? The world is not equal. And some people do lie on their CVs. And though I'm not telling you to lie, I'm just going to tell you, make sure you can back up every single line on your CV. Make sure you know every single line on your CV. Most employers are doing background checks. And those background checks vary from your address. They're doing checks on your work history. They're doing checks on your credit. You can go a bit further. Some of them will even do clearance checks if you go into a government role. And government roles have two levels of clearance check. You've got SC and you've got DC, which is a top secret stuff. And they dig into everything. I'm not saying this to frighten you. What I'm saying to you is that depending on the role you're going for and the level you're going in at, you have to make sure that whatever they're going to find in your past is clean. It is clear, because that will stop you in your tracks. They're not going to put that investment in before they've called you for an interview. But once they've decided to spend their time on an interview, they start digging. And that includes LinkedIn and Facebook. Now, I would never tell you don't have a Facebook profile. What I am saying is you can't have a profile which is at direct conflict and odds with a job you're looking for. It just don't make no sense. People employ people they like. And the bottom line is, if your site, if your Facebook page is offensive to the people that you're trying to employ you, they will not even bother to go any further. LinkedIn is a very funny one as well, because LinkedIn shows actually a level of professionalism. It allows them to be able to see the chart of your career if you use it correctly. So I'd say have a LinkedIn profile because it's very, very good. All right, so we've done that. Your CV is what it's all about. You know your CV inside and out. Make sure you confirm the interview. Make sure that you nail down the time and date and the location of the interview. This is very, very important. The next thing you need to do, I want you to ask questions. You need to ask them, what is the format of the interview? Why? Because it might be a format that you're not entirely comfortable with, and therefore you need the maximum amount of preparation time. Some interviews ask you to do a presentation. Some will ask you to use PowerPoint. Some will ask you just to speak. Some will ask you to do a technical test. Make sure you know what you're doing. Some of them will ask you to do competency tests. Some of them will ask you to do a whole range of online tests, Myers-Briggs, the whole 9 yards. The bottom line is, just make sure that you know what it is. If you're not sure about any of these tests, you're not sure about a presentation, ask someone. Someone has always gone where you've gone before. Ask me, I'll help you out in stuff like that. But just make sure that you know exactly what you're going into. There are little tricks that you do to prepare yourself. Because the reason why people fail at interviews, yeah, fine, some of them just simply can't do the job. But it's about nerves. And my motto is, the more you prepare is the better you will do. They used to say that the more I practice, the luckier I get. Well, it's the same principle. So you're not doing anything over. Just make sure you know what the interview is going to look like. What's the structure? If you can find out who's going to be in the interview, then that's useful as well. If you know someone in the company, ask them, who are these people? I've just secured my new role, which I'll start at the end of the month, and I secured it in conjunction with a friend of mine who works there already. And I asked him, who are the people I'm interviewing? What's their attitude towards stuff? How do they operate? What questions am I likely to get? Don't be bashful. You want this job. The bottom line is, you wouldn't have applied for it if you didn't want it. So you have to demonstrate how much you want it by doing the background work. Part of the background work is to research the company and the role. Yeah, everybody talks about doing the research on the company, but I'm also trying to advise you to research the role. You need to know details about the role. What does the role look like? Because guess what? If I'm interviewing you and it turns out that you don't know much about the company or the role you're coming into, then I'm likely to think that this is just a speculative thing. I'm looking for people, when I'm employing people, who know as much about the role and the company as is physically possible. When you're doing your research on the company, it's not just about information which the public already knows. Yep. Make sure that you're in there with information which might be a little bit off charts. What's their ethos? What's their company culture like? It's not just how much money they made last year. It's not just stuff like that. Do they have little company mottos? The company I'm going to, they talk about being fanatical. And why is that important? It's important because when you're framing your responses to questions, you can use keywords which they will associate with their company. And what you're trying to do throughout the entire interview process is to ensure that they start to see you as one of them. It's difficult, but it's doable. You need for them to start seeing you as one of them. So they should see you demonstrating the things that they say are a part of their culture as a company. So they say they're fanatical about support. They're all about customer service. They're all about punctuality. They're all about listening. Whatever it is their ethos. Make sure you've logged onto that and you can slip that into your answers. Every question you need to answer. We're going to come back to that in a second. Please, please, please remember, interviews are a two-way thing. So they're expecting you to have questions. Now, what I'm trying to get from you to do is to have good, solid questions about the company and about the role. One of my favorite questions that I always ask is, how did this role come about? Because I want to know whether it's through expansion, whether it's through a person leaving, because you start to get a feel for what you're going into rather. So for example, if it turns out that the person left, you might want to say, can they share the reason why the person left? Now, if they say the person went off to sunnier climes, better opportunity, blah, 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 then you're cool. But if you notice them stuttering, a little bit shady, then you start to know that probably this is not a company that you actually want to work into. But you need to have a good set of questions. What's the sort of scope for improvement that I can expect? What are the training opportunities that I can expect? Will I have staff that I will need to manage? What's your engagement process within the company? All these things demonstrate that you're not just looking for something to hook you up for 2 or 3 weeks, but you're looking for a career. And we move from having jobs to having careers. So you need to figure out, what do I need to know from them about their culture, their ethos? That's what we're trying to do. Now, I thought I'd stick in this little part about having stuff ready for telephone interviews. Over the last 3 years, I don't think I've done a single interview where it was not preceded with a telephone interview first. And what I'm going to say to you about telephone interviews is very short and very straight. Take it just the same as you would take a proper upfront face-to-face interview. The reason why people are doing telephone interviews now is because it allows them to bring in staff who may be remotely located to cut through some of the faff, because they're not going to waste time bringing you into the office, cutting into someone's schedule if you can't even pass a telephone interview. When you're doing a telephone interview, see if you can do it on a landline. No one wants a crackly line, a line that gets disconnected. Try and find a very nice, quiet place to do it. If you've got a home line, dial in, or you give them that number to dial in. It makes it better. When you're doing a telephone interview, my advice, stand up. Stand up. And the reason why I'm saying you should stand up is because when you're sitting down, a lot of us, if we're not in an interview situation, like me right now, you can see how I'm sitting down. I'm a bit relaxed. I'm a bit chilled back. If I was in an interview situation, I'd be sitting down like this. And my hands would be like this in front of me, and I'd be sitting down like this. And what happens when you sit like this or you stand up, you give your lungs space to breathe, and it allows you to speak more clearly. So I always advise that if you're doing a telephone interview, take the opportunity to stand up or sit as if you were in a formal interview. And here's the last thing. And for those who know me and will probably question my ability to do this, you need to smile. Because if you smile on the telephone, it makes its way to the other end. Because even though the telephone interview is less personal, it still allows some transmission of what we would call body language. And smiling, oddly enough, is something that can be transmitted down a phone. So you need to smile to make sure that everything is just nice and your voice is coming over right. Settle yourself down for about 5 minutes before the telephone call. Catch your breath, log out of stuff like Facebook, put your other phones on silent, tell your kids, your neighbors that you just want this 30 minutes, 45 minutes by yourself. Just remember, you also need to have a copy of your CV with you, because telephone interviews are the time when what they really try to do is to go through your CV. That's the interview in the chain of interviews where what they're trying to do is just match your qualifications on paper to what their requirements are. So having a copy of your CV during that interview so you can flick through, if you can remember dates, if you know it off the top of your head, that's cool. But never, never, never feel that you shouldn't just have your CV there with you. Okay, so I'm going to take it that you've aced the telephone interview. And now that you've aced the telephone interview, they're going to come back to you and they're going to say, look, great stuff. We'd like to have the face-to-face. Now, here's the thing. As in anything you're trying to do, you need to congratulate yourself for making it to the next step. You need to understand that typically for any one role, they will not bother with a face-to-face for one position. They will not interview more than 3 to 5 people. So I want you to sort of understand what you have achieved. You have gone from probably, I know in IT, it ranges in the hundreds of people who apply for one role. And suddenly you're in the final 5 or even the final 3. And so when you get that invite, you have done a big achievement. And I want you to know this because this is about you feeling confident. You wouldn't even get the invite if you weren't good enough. And I can't stress that enough. The reason why people mess up in interviews, yeah, some people just don't know the content, but oddly, it's because they lack confidence in themselves. How can you lack confidence in yourself if you have gone from hundreds to the final 5? People, you are good enough. All we need to do is to do the last few things to push you over the line. Okay? Now, my attitude towards face to face interviews is very, very methodical. And let me tell you what I do. 2 days before the interview, I switch into interview mode. And what I do is I consider that the interview has already begun. And everything I do from that point forward, and I know someone's out there saying, boy, this sounds a bit excessive, but everything I do from that point forward is designed to get me that job. I have no wish to do 6, 7 interviews to get a job. Right now, my batting average is I get 2 out of 3 jobs that I go for. Not because academically I'm better than anyone, but because I think I have a good process. So you ring them up and you thank them for the interview. And you ring them up and you smile on the phone, and that transmits to them. Now you're thinking to yourself, but Paul, I'm probably just talking to the PA. Doesn't matter. Make sure that from the moment the PA, the receptionist, the secretary, the HR person hears your voice, they hear someone who, if they are asked, they think would fit into the company. Make sure you're not caught unawares by that. So you thank them for selecting you for the interview. You take that opportunity to confirm the details and the location and the format of the interview. We good? Okay. The next thing you do is what I like to call a dress rehearsal. Now, I'm not talking about going through the whole interview process. I'm actually talking about dress as in your clothes. What you're trying to achieve in the next few processes is to remove anything at all that may cause you concern or worry on the day of the interview. Remember that. Everything we're doing now is about removing anything that's going to cause you to get agitated, to get upset, to get whatever. I want you to take out your interview clothes. Yes, I have a special suit, shirt, and tie, which I only wear for interviews. I want you to take it out. I want you to put it on. And by putting it on, you will be checking that all the buttons are okay, that the zipper's okay. Ladies, you know you got more buttons and zippers than us. Make sure everything is perfectly okay. You haven't gained a bit of weight and suddenly it's not going to fit you on the morning. Why? I want you to find out any issues with that outfit 2 days before. That gives you time to change things. Check, are there any spots on my shirt? Is my tie still neatly tied? Is the suit clean? Is everything right? I want your shoes to be clean. Nothing. When I've interviewed people in the past, I look at their shoes. Your shoes need to be clean, people. You check your outfit from top to bottom 2 days before. You take it off. You fix what needs to be fixed. You hang it up. What that ensures is that there's no surprises waiting for you on the morning of the interview. The next thing I want you to do, and this is a real bugbear of mine, I want you to check your route to the interview meticulously. I need for you to use TfL or National Rail or Google Maps. All 3 of those will cover every way of getting to where you want to go to. What I expect you to do is to target, and listen to this, I want you to target arrival at the interview for 60 minutes before the interview. I hear you. saying you shouldn't be there before 15, but I'll come to that. Why am I saying you should target it for 60 minutes? Because shit happens. Let's be clear. You could get stuck in the Blackwall Tunnel. You could stuck on some bypass. The tube guy could choose to go for a break. I need you to be there 60 minutes. And here's what you're going to do with that 60 minutes. You're going to turn up. You're going to locate the offices. And then you're going to find yourself a cafe. And you're going to go into the cafe, pret-a-manger, whatever you choose. And here's what you're going to have. Water only. Because I don't want you dropping any ketchup from your sausage roll on that lovely suit. If you must have something, have some water, so if it falls on you, you have time for it to dry. Some offices are hard to find. And so if you're there 60 minutes before, you've given yourself enough time to locate the office, to be 100% sure it's the right office, and to find yourself somewhere to chill out. If it's go back to your car and chill out, you go and do that. If it's not, you find a cafe that's nearby and chill out. 60 minutes. When you're using Google Maps to log out your route, the reason why you're starting 2 days before is because what you need to do, you need to check the route at the time of day that you're likely to do the journey. Because what Google Maps tells you is what sort of traffic happens. Okay? Now this might sound a bit technical, but what we're saying is, if you do the drive from my house in Croydon up to the West End in 45 minutes on a Sunday, on a Monday, interview time, that could take me 2.5 hours. So I want you to get the realistic times. When it comes to trains and tube, my recommendation is that you put 2 trains in between you and a reasonable arrival time. In other words, if there's a train that gets there at 9 o'clock and there's a train that gets there for 9:30, I want you to be on the train that gets there at 8:30. Put 2 trains in between. It doesn't mean you still won't end up late, but it means you've given it a good Boy Scout try. And let me tell you something for free. An interviewer may say to you, oh, don't worry about it, you were late. But when there's only 3 of you going for a role and the other 2 were early and you were late, trust me, you're losing points. Do not be late under any circumstance. Okay, so now you've got your route sorted out. You know what time you're supposed to arrive. You know where you're going. Make sure you have a copy of your CV. Make sure you have a copy of the job description with you. They should not make any references to either of those documents which you are not aware of. You should not be shocked by the salary level. You should not be shocked by the role and what is expected. If you are shocked, I'm hoping that you're going to be shocked for the best. Here's the thing now. While you're on your way, you are in interview mode. There's a gentleman called Matt Buckland who recently tweeted, and he tweeted this. He said, Karma, the guy who just pushed past me on the tube and then suggested I go F myself has just arrived for his interview with me. So look, when you're going for an interview, you don't cut people up in traffic. You don't swear at them. You don't elbow the guy who steps on you in the tube. You don't be impolite. You don't be rude. You keep yourself in interview mode the whole way to the interview. The receptionist is probably, or the security guard, one of the two, are probably the first 2 people you will meet as representatives of that company. Treat them with respect. They are the gatekeepers. And you'd be amazed the sort of relationship receptionists, security guards have with the important people inside of organizations. If you come in and you treat them like they're dirt, I can guarantee you word will get back. Okay? Now, you arrived 60 minutes into the vicinity. You put yourself in that office 15 minutes before. Not 20, not 14, 15 minutes before. You sit down, you wait, you read the local newspaper, you read one of their company pamphlets, and you wait for your interview. Everybody you greet with a firm handshake and a smile. You will accept drinks. Remember what I said. Remember what I said. The reason why you're doing 99% of the stuff you're doing is because what you're trying to demonstrate to them is that you are the right person to work with them. That's why a lot of the stuff that I'm telling you on this webinar, they're not stuff which is highly technical. There's no magic bullet. What I'm trying to get over to you is for you to understand that especially face-to-face interviews, they are about, why do I want to work with you? They're really about your personality. Now, when I just came to the UK, I obviously didn't drink tea because, tea was something that you drank once a day and that was it. And someone explained to me that, look, the English people and their tea, this is their big thing. Tea is important to them. When you go into an office, you may be called upon to be a part of the little tea round. Never understood it myself, but it's real. Where someone gets up, collects all the cups, and goes around. It's a part of the working environment. I'm not saying you need to drink it. I'm saying if you came to my house and I offered you something and you said no, yeah, probably I wouldn't be most impressed. Think about it from that point of view. This is about you making sure that you treat them like someone they would like to work with. Okay? Now, a lot of interviews are very formal, very structured. Nowadays, what they have a list of questions which are designed to expose your competencies for the job role that you're doing. However, some interviewers have a very casual style where they'll talk about anything but. One of the interviews I went on recently, the gentleman said to me, how would you explain voice over internet to a 5-year-old? And that was actually quite a challenging question. But what he was trying to do, he was trying to figure out whether or not I was the sort of project manager who could break things down for non-technical clients. So what I'm trying to say to you here is, don't be overly relaxed because the style of the interview can appear very casual. They're still drilling down into your personality. If they ask you questions from a set format, make sure you answer the questions directly. Very rarely are they asking you technical questions. But if they do ask you technical questions, make sure you answer the questions very clearly. If you don't know an answer, just say, I don't know. Do not blag. Do not BS them. A simple I don't know. It doesn't take off that many points to say you don't know something unless it is a very fundamental thing. And I'd like to think that if you didn't lie on your CV, then you shouldn't be worrying about the fundamental stuff. Okay? So you're sitting there ready. If you're a leg crosser, you cross your legs. I do my hands like this because this helps me to grip onto myself if I'm feeling nervous. Not to say I do, but if you do know that you're a nervous person, don't twiddle with your pencil. Keep your arms together like this. Before you had stepped into that interview, I would have expected that you would have at least put your phone on silent. My personal recommendation is that what you do, the moment you arrive, you turn your phone off. We don't want to hear your embarrassing ringtone in the middle of their office. Not yet. Not until we've got the job nailed down. So I recommend you turn your phone off so there's no mistakes, no slips, nothing like that. Remember, you need to know what's on your CV. That's the only guide they have to who you are. You go through it with them. That's their questions. At the end, they're typically going to say to you, do you have any questions? Please Ask them sensible, solid questions. But you may be lucky because sometimes if you get a very chatty interviewer, what they end up doing is they may answer some of your questions while you were going through the interviews. I do recommend you have about 3 to 5 questions, but if they've answered them, it's totally acceptable for you to say, yeah, actually, you did answer that question for me when you said XYZ. Don't just say you've answered all my questions because that sounds like a bit of a lame excuse. Say when you said XYZ, you actually answered my questions. Or you could say, yeah, you touched on it, but could you expand a bit? Always have good, solid questions. One of the questions I've asked people before is, how would you describe the environment that I'm due to work in? Always use positive language. So talk about it as if you've already got the job. See if they feel comfortable referring to you in that sort of a tense. It's no 100% indicator, but it is a nice, strong indicator of how they're feeling. You know what? I'm going to talk about jokes because humor is very, very important. Yeah, if you're going to be working with people, humor is a good thing. If you know you're corny, if you know you can't do jokes, don't. Just let it slide. Just do the bits you can. Just nod and go, nod and go. Okay? Once you're finished, you've done the interview, you've looked at everybody. Remember, I sort of missed this, so I need to go back. You make sure that if you're being interviewed by 2 or 3 people, that what you're actually doing, you're referring, doesn't matter who's asked you the question, but you're delivering your answer to everyone in the room. Yeah? You're not just delivering your answer to the person who's asked you. Watch their body language. Their body language can tell you a lot, just as they're watching your body language, which is why my hands like this shuts my body language down. You sit erect, you talk clear. You always talk like you're talking to someone 1 meter behind them. Yep, you talk clear and concise. Don't babble. One of the mistakes we make in interviews is that when we're not confident, we babble. You answer the question and you stop. The moment you start to hear yourself going on, you stop. You let the answer settle. It's their interview. It's their job to interview you. You will get your turn later on. Okay, so that's it. The interview's done. They say to you, thank you for coming in. You get up, you shake their hands, you thank them again for inviting you in, and you never leave until you ask what happens next in the process. You need to know what will happen next in the process so that you can be sure that you walk away knowing, well, I'm going to wait for a day or two, I'm going to wait for a week or two, or whatever it is. Okay? Remember, you started this interview 2 days before the interview. So I don't want you going down into the lobby, whipping out your phone, calling your mate Bongo and saying, yeah, man, I'd mashed up the interview. No. You take yourself, you head out, you get back into your car, you get out of the local area before you revert to the native you are. That's all about making sure that you don't slip up. Doesn't mean that you have to suppress your personality, but what I'm saying is get the job first. We can't afford to be going for 4 or 5 interviews and not getting the job. We only have to get the job once and then we're in. And when we're in, then you can relax and be whatever you want to be. But get the job first. All right, guys? That was 40 minutes of me talking constantly. And I'm tired. It's a Sunday, it's been a long day. So now's your chance. There should be a little box there where I just typed in any questions. If you have any questions, I'll answer them. I have a question already which says, is it okay to carry notes on an index card into the interview? Example, I usually carry a list of relevant legislation laws relevant to the job. Yeah, I guess it's fine to carry them into the interview, but I wouldn't I wouldn't be 100% comfortable if I was interviewing you and you were referring to notes to answer the questions. I don't know what field you're in. It looks like you're into the legal field. So I've never done a legal interview before, but I wouldn't imagine that an interviewer would be comfortable if you needed to refer to notes, unless it's something that they asked you to prepare before. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Are there any other questions? Now, I'm remembering that there's a 30-second delay on the speech that I'm saying, so I'm just typing in to you guys. I think that goes to you instantly. Any other questions at all? Because if not, then I'll only thing left for me to do will be for me to let you know that I'm planning for the end of May a presentation skills masterclass. Now, unfortunately, it cannot be done over the net. It has to be done face to face. And it's really about how you present yourselves, how you do presentations, how you really come over. What do you do to take away nerves? How do you structure a good presentation? What's the best format to deliver presentations in? And of course, I'd like to invite you all to this. But in terms of this one, how can you? I got another question, and that is, how can you best prepare for questions that you may be asked? Okay, well, there's no way to really know exactly what they may ask, but again, it comes back to what I said before. If you know someone at the company or someone actually doing that role already, doesn't have to be at that same company, then you I'm laughing because someone just asked me a very, very funny question, which I'll come to in a second. Okay, so where was I? Yeah, you should have done research to make sure that there's nothing they're asking you which is outside of your scope. Two people have asked about awkward questions that they may ask you. Now, if they ask you an awkward question, like I said before, if you simply don't know it, just say you don't know. But I'm expecting you all, and this is the way it needs to be experts in your field. And so there's very little they should be asking you that you don't know. Now, of course, there are some people who they're interviewing you and they just be nasty and they just want to ask you the awkward question. You can't do anything about that. But that's why it's so critical to find out about the company, find out about the role you're doing, and to not lie on your CV. Make sure that everything marries up so the questions that they're asking shouldn't really be so difficult. John has asked, are there any killer questions that you would always ask? Like I said before, John, I don't know if you were on yet, I would always ask them, how did the role come about? Yep. I'd always ask that question because what I'd like to know is, what am I going into? Is this growth? Is this redundancy? Am I turning out for something? And it shows interest. I'd always ask, as I said before, about the culture of the company. Nowadays, a lot of companies, especially the larger ones, they're very big on culture and fit. And they talk about, will you fit into our culture? So I would ask questions on that level. I've asked people before to tell me why they think I should take the job. Yeah, but that's when I sort of know I've nailed it and I'm allowed to be. Sorry, I'm playing with this. It was given to me to clean my screen. So if you see me playing with something, that's what I've been doing. Martha has asked about, when shall I ring for feedback? Generally, I don't ring for feedback. Generally, my last question is, what happens from here? And typically, that's their opportunity to say, look, we will be back in touch with you with 2 to 3 days. Now, as was my recent experience, sometimes they say they'll be back in 2 to 3 days, and 3-4 days they're not back yet. I would always find out from them, when can I expect to hear from you? And they will say, we're going to a few more interviews, we'll contact you in a week or whatever it is. And I would wait a week and a day, then I'd ring up and say, I've not heard, and be very polite about that. Another question has been asked, which is a very good question. What if you don't want a drink when they offer you one? Just take the drink and put it beside you. You don't have to drink it. What I'm trying to say here is, what you're trying to do, I mean, just picture it. Picture if you invite me over to your house. You've invited me over to your house. I come into your house and you say to me, Paul, would you like a drink? And I say, no. Okay, the pragmatic people, I can hear you saying, but he doesn't want to drink. But there are some people for whom not accepting the drink brings up walls in front. And what I'm saying is, for the act of taking it and putting it on the desk and actually not even drinking it, it's not worth it. Remember, you want this job. And so I'm not saying you need to take the drink to get the job. I'm just saying every point counts. Because when the chips are down, they are going to compare you to the other two people. Everybody's got the degrees. Everybody's got Prince too. Everybody's got the legal degree. Everybody's got their experience. There's hundreds of thousands of unemployed people out there. So all I'm trying to say to you is do what it takes to get the job. And on the Monday morning when you start the first day, you can say, well, actually, I don't drink tea. No big thing. You're in the job. My job is to get you the job. In terms of jobs for Skype, interviews for Skype, you do what I did. I put this up. Yep. And that's because I don't want you to see what's behind there, which, considering a lot of you know me from social media, you probably don't want to see the whips and chains that are behind there. So you prepare yourself. You get yourself into an environment which is as sterile as possible. We don't need to see your Grateful Dead posters on the back of the wall because I may hate rock. You get yourself for a Skype interview into a nice neutral position. You treat it as if it was a face-to-face interview. So you dress yourself as if you were going into the interview. I know it sounds excessive, but Skype, they can see you. Yep. You don't turn up in short sleeves like I have. You put at least a nice top on, something that looks like you would have been in an interview. Because the only reason why they're using Skype is so they can see you. Yep. Remember that you're going to be seen. So Skype means that they can see you. So you got to make sure that you present yourself in the way that you would if you were going in front of them. You answer the questions clearly. If you're going to do something like Skype, then you test. You test stuff before. Before I came onto this webinar, I set up a dummy webinar and did a test to make sure all my equipment's working. It's not your fault if the equipment doesn't work, but it does show something if you can make sure it does work. The next question is, would you prepare for a different style of interview that you've not experienced? Ask questions. Let me give you a prime example. We waste a lot of our time on good old Facebook, and we don't really tap into the level of resources that are available to us. There is no style of interview that no one has ever done before. So you can be sure that when you ask them, remember what I said, when they told you that you're coming for the interview and you ask for the format, they are obligated to tell you. If you're going through a recruitment consultant, like I tend to do, recruitment consultants tend to tell you this is the type of interview you're going to go through. And some of the notes that I'm going to be sending you are examples of the types of interviews that they do. And yes, I'm going to send you guys some notes when the webinar is over. So ask someone, go onto Facebook. Don't just talk about the Prince's baby. Go onto Facebook and say, I have been offered an interview. It's going to be a competency-based interview. I've never done one before. Can anyone help? Yep. Please, please, please go and do that. Okay? Ask someone. You now have my email address. You have my contact details. I've done so many interviews. I must have exhausted all possible interviews. In other words, ask for help. If you don't ask for help, you won't get help. And you shouldn't have missed our goal setting seminar, because when we did the goal seminar, we talked about the power of asking. If you need something, ask. Okay? Thank you. The next question is, do we have to give them your real Facebook details, or shall I get a fake one? You don't have to give anybody your Facebook details. It's not a part of a job, but you can rest assured that some people try to find you on Facebook. I think I saw something a couple of years ago saying that 67% of all employers look at their prospective employee's Facebook page. Now, that says a lot. It's a window to who you are. And even though people on Facebook like to think, that I'm exactly the way I am in real life as I am on Facebook, that's not entirely true. The reality is that Facebook allows us to think that we can drop certain barriers and we may make comments which may be what we believe, but we would never put it that way in a public place. And you certainly wouldn't want a prospective employer to see you posting some of the stuff that we post. Not saying individuals directly, but some of the stuff that's on Facebook is not employer friendly. Okay? It's not going to work out that way. But do remember, you do have an option on Facebook to make your post visible to friends only. Yep. What I tend to do, if I know I'm going for a really big, really important interview, I actually shut my Facebook page down. Yeah, there's an option which allows you to shut it down and come back to it at a later point. And you know what? I can bet there's someone there saying, "Poor boy, that sounds drastic." Employment is drastic. The ability to pay my bills is very drastic. Okay, so I'm one of those people who I say, you do what you need to do to get that job. Because if you don't get the job, you can't pay for my presentation skills workshop. And then that's just pointless, isn't it? Okay, next question. Do I give mock interviews? I give training and coaching for people leading up to interviews. It ain't cheap, but it apparently works. And so people keep coming back. So I prepare people for their interviews. So that's absolutely something I do. Mock interviews, I don't like rehearsing stuff. And even when I'm training people to do presentations, I don't like them to rehearse stuff over and over, because I find that if you rehearse stuff and while you're actually doing it, you forget it, it tends to make you more nervous. So I'm very one of those people who believe that people should speak naturally, and interviews, again, as I said at the beginning, are just a presentation. So what I like people to do is to go into interviews and just be natural. If you know your CV, if you know your job, if you've researched the company, if you've researched the role, there's very, very little that should surprise you. And let me tell you this, if you do go into an interview and someone comes up with what John described as a killer question, but at you, it may just be they don't want you in the job. And so don't sweat. What other styles of interviews could you expect? The competency-based interviews they're just asking you to demonstrate competencies around certain specific tasks. There's a whole range of stuff, which could be in the format of a online survey. They could ask you to do a presentation, scenario, role play type stuff, a whole range of stuff. But the competency-based ones seem to be the most common ones. And what they're doing, for example, is they're looking at, okay, I'm a project manager, so I'll use this as an example. One of the competencies of a project manager is about managing people. So the question would be structured something like, give me an example where you've had to manage a difficult employee or a difficult third party. Yep. And so in all of your roles, you need to think about, well, what are the competencies that I need for my role? And you need to be prepared to give examples when. And that's how the questions normally start. Can you give an example when you had to discipline someone? When you had to apologize for an error? When? And that's the way the competency-based ones goes. Okay, next question is, do you do any training on how to get shortlisted to an interview, especially for career changes? To get shortlisted for an interview, you simply need to really nail your CV. One of the mistakes people make is they have different CVs. Getting shortlisted is simply about having a CV which leaps out at them, which jumps out. I hear people say your CV should only be 2 pages. I say rubbish. My CV is 8 pages long. But the first page of my CV tells everybody everything they need to know about me in a single paragraph, which I call my profile. I'm doing my hand like this because that's the size of it. It's about a third a quarter to a third of the page long. You can't get shortlisted unless they see something in your CV which absolutely leaps out at them. So what you should be doing, you should be very, very quick and flexible to tailor your CV to the very specific role. So what you do is you take the job description, always ask for a job description, especially if you're not going through a recruitment consultant, because they should be sending that to you automatically. So what you need to have is the job description and your CV, and you need to edit it as you go. So you're looking at it, and I'm not telling you to lie. What I'm telling you is to match your skills to the job description. That will get you shortlisted. Yep. That's the only thing I know of. I don't know of anything else. And I'm happy if anybody else can contribute to that. But to get shortlisted, you have to be the person whose CV stands up. Remember, we don't do spelling mistakes. I wouldn't even insult you to tell you to spell check your CV. What I would tell you is that poor grammar is just as bad. Okay, the question is, but what if the application is not CV based, but an application form? Well, the same thing applies. The reality is that a CV is just a templated application form. So what you're supposed to be doing on an application form is there's a generic section where they're asking you for your skills, your experience, and your stuff. But they're also going to ask you questions like, what do you think you can bring to the role? You need to be looking at the job description and you need to be matching it. So they're saying they're looking for someone who can do time management. You need to be saying in the application form that I have excellent time management skills. So it's the same thing. It's no different. The application form is just a structured way of collecting CVs. So don't make that myth you. It's the same process. Yeah. So I was talking to you about tailoring your CV. Well, consider the application form a tailored CV. Don't leave the application form until the night before the deadline. Most application forms nowadays, they can be stored and you can go back to them. Okay? So what I want you to do is treat application form like a modified CV. Copy and paste, because guess what? Your CV should be perfect. If you can do it online, it's better. Handwritten, I don't know about that. Editable PDF, fine. You copy and paste and you change things around. Get someone else to read your CV or read your application form before you send it off. All right. Good question, Grace. Yeah, that was a good question, Grace. If this role is new, other than asking how the role came about, what else might you ask? Thanks for that, John. You're gonna make me a bit uncomfortable. Oh, I will come to that one, but I just did that one. But we'll talk about John's in terms of what other questions where you might, if the role is new, you may ask, what's the scope? Where do they see the role going? How do they see the role expanding? How does the role fit into their overall plans? It's all about questions like that. Linda seems to think I haven't totally answered the question about career changes. I'm wondering if what it is an internal career change within the organization, or if it's something which is totally new to you, and therefore you're thinking that perhaps your CV may not match it. And so that's the problem. Let me know when you guys catch up if that's the thing. So what I'll do, I'll talk about that. If you're doing a career change, you still have to have the competencies, because no one's doing you a favor in terms of, okay, it's a career change, so we don't need her to have, or him to have, those competencies. They still need you to have the competencies. So what you need to do is you need to look at your past roles and see what in that role you can pull out which could match the other one. They may be totally different roles, but let's take something like you've been off for 6 years looking after your children, and now you want to get back into the workplace. The sensible people will see that as a role. You can still talk about the planning, the managing that you had to do when you were off. So all I'm suggesting to you, if it's a career change, you still use your previous career. Yeah, you still use your previous career as the benchmark, because you can still demonstrate certain competencies. You may not be able to demonstrate technical competencies, but you can certainly demonstrate some of the other competencies, the personality traits, for example. What are the personality traits that you now have that would match this new job? But if you're coming from one career to the other, you still, did you use Microsoft Word there? Yes, I did. Because you have to be careful. You can't just change your career because you want to change your career if you're not going to be competent to do it. So I'm going to go with the concept that you have chosen this new career, not just because you fancy a go, but because you know you can do it. So your job is to highlight the things that you have done before, which this new employer can say, okay, so he hasn't done exactly the job, but here you go. I have absolutely got some skills which I can transfer. I guess the short word is transferable skills. So, long and short of it, I probably should have said this 3 minutes ago. I want you to think about your transferable skills into this new sector, Grace. Yeah, that's all I want you to do. But also, you still need to be looking for people in that sector. Yep, because people would have worked there before. Go online, go into LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a forum for every profession. Find out what the buzzwords are in this new career. Find out what the new trends are. Find out what the new technologies and new ways of doing things that they're talking about so that you can say, okay, so they're doing this. I used to do this. How do I match it together? Are we good? I'm hoping that I've answered that question. However, it doesn't matter if you feel that I may not have. I have just sent you all my email address, which will allow you to send me any follow-up questions or details after that. That's for those of you who are not linked to me on Facebook. What I am going to do, I'm going to send you guys about 5 or 6 documents which are a whole list of different things about how to approach interviews and how to really nail them down. Much of it will be a repeat of what I've just said, but most importantly, you will have these documents there for you to look at, and I'm happy for you to share them with whoever you wish to share them with. Guys, we're 3 minutes over our time. It is Sunday. I do need to well, actually, I have got nothing to do until the 26th of May. So we could all just sit here and hang out, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to shut this down now. And I want to thank you all of you for attending. It's been really great. The questions have been very good. If you do feel when I'm finished that I haven't answered a question completely or you have another question, please, please, please feel free to email me and I'll make sure I give you a more comprehensive and direct answer. If you simply have a question that you didn't think of before, then again, I'm happy for you guys to email me and we get that done. Okay, my name is Paul Lawrence and I'd like to thank you for attending this free webinar. Please spread the word to people. We don't have to go into these interviews unarmed. We can help each other. I'm more than happy to give advice where I can. I think my success rate in getting jobs does stand for itself. I know at least one of you has interviews next week, and I wish you the very, very best of luck. What I'd like you to do is to feed back to me. I will send you a feedback form as well to see how we can improve this webinar. And, let's not waste these opportunities. Every interview, you have just as good an opportunity to get the job as anybody else. And I'd really like to thank you for your time. And I look forward to your feedback on the feedback forms, which you will get before the end of the night. Thank you.